44 layers, 40 layers, what? 58 layers? But what does this all mean? Well, welcome to today's video where I'll be explaining a basic concept of digital art, and that is, you probably guessed it, layers! When I first started digital art, I had no clue what was happening with these squares at the side of my canvas and had to search up many videos to understand all its different features, and so today, I'll try to help y'all out with some basics. Alright, so what are layers? Layers are kind of like pieces of a puzzle that you draw and that help your drawing come together. Okay, that was kind of bad. Let's take coloring as a better example. You start off your piece by using less saturated colors for your base and start to use more saturated and darker colors for your shadows or lighter colors for your highlights. That's kind of like what layers are, and they're each step of your digital art process instead of your coloring process. And they're here to help your digital art experience a bit easier, but it takes some practice, so let's do an example. Alright, first things first, when you open your canvas, you want to find where your layers are located and how to create a new one. So on this application, iArtbook, the layers are located at the top right next to the colors, right here. And it says layers, and to create a new layer, you just click the plus button here, and now we have layer 2. So I'm going to delete the old layer, and now we have two layers, layer 2 and layer 3. So let's say I'm drawing on layer 2 right now, and I want to draw something. So for example, let's draw a circle. And cool, so now we have this blue circle on layer 2. And now on layer 3, I'm going to draw something else. So how about we make a smiley face? Boop. Oh, okay, my brush turned that into a not so happy face. Cool. So now we have this super lopsided dude, female, no gender, but we have the super lopsided object that is supposed to be a smiley face. So because these two colors are on different layers, what we do to one layer will not affect the other. So for example, if I want to erase this right eye over here because it looks a bit lopsided, I select this layer. As I can see, that's where the white is on, and I'm going to erase it. But nothing happens to the bottom blue layer. Now that's because they're on two different layers. So anything that's on another layer will not get affected. So same thing for the blue. Let's say I want it to have not a circular head, but some weird pointy, I don't really know what's happening, but let's say I wanted it to look like this. I could do this, or I could draw a line in the middle, and this is the face. But the white here is not affected because they're on two different layers. Now, one thing to know for layers is that the layer on top is like the layer you do after. So let's say I have these two layers, but I put the white one up here under the blue layer. You won't be able to see that because it's like when you're doing, let's go back to that coloring analogy. It's like you colored the white on first, and then you covered it with this big blue blob. So it's still here. As we can see, this white, it's kind of hard to see here. Okay, so we can see that we still have this white smiley face, but because if I draw this blue on top, you won't be able to see it. So make sure your layers are on top of each other the way you want it to be. So this takes a lot of practice, but after getting a lot of practice, it becomes something in your second nature just to do when you're doing your digital art pieces. So I love using layers, and as we can see in the beginning of the piece, I use them maybe too much with my 44, my 40, my 58 layers. And not all digital artists have this many layers on this piece, and I don't think they usually do, but there's nothing to stop you from having so many layers if it makes your digital art process easier. So one thing that I like to use layers for especially is when I'm doing my line art and my coloring. So here we can see I have some line art on the side over here and the bigger blobs of color underneath. So this means that my colors are underneath my line art, so my line art will show up on top. Alright, so now that we understand what layers are, let's explore some functions that they have that are used a lot. So the first function that I love to use, that I use in every single one of my pieces, is alpha lock. What is alpha lock? So when this is enabled, you can only draw on this layer where there's already color. Okay, once again, super bad explanation, so let me just show you. I'm going to pick this skin tone color that I have of Bokuto, Hinata, and Miya Atsumu. So with these skin tone colors, you can see that there is no lock or anything on this layer over here, layer 11, highlighted in blue. And let's say I want to go color Bokuto-san's skin. And so let's say there's a light coming in from the top left. Oops, top left over here. So I want to have some shadow. But as we can see, this color is getting onto this purple background and onto his shirt, which we don't want. So what I'm going to do now is, because this layer is only consists of these skin tone colors of the 3 characters, I'm going to click alpha lock. And because there is only color, so like I was saying before, it only works colors where there is color. So on this layer, we can see if I alpha locked it and I shade in now, ooh, it doesn't go outside the lines. So by using alpha lock, since there was no previous color, like peach color, or there's no other color here or anywhere else except, see, I'll hide my layers, that's where all the skin tone colors were. So because there was no other skin tone color anywhere else, for example, Miya's jacket or Hinata's jacket, when I shade on this alpha locked layer, it'll only go onto where there is already color on that layer. Alright, so once again, where there is color, and I alpha lock the layer, and if I do whatever I want, I will not color outside the lines. But boom, easier coloring. So this is super helpful, and I wish I learned this earlier because I had a hard time coloring within the lines. Okay? It took me forever. I was always erasing to make sure it's where I want it to be, being super careful when I was with my line art. But with alpha lock, because it kind of helps you have that boundary, it saves you so much time and it's a lot easier. So make sure you use alpha lock. It could have different names on other applications, so make sure you play around with that. So number 2 is the duplicate layer. Oops. Okay, so the duplicate layer. I have a lot of layers mainly for this reason. Whenever I'm done my base colors, for example, there's skin tones over here, I like to duplicate the layer so I kind of have a backup if I mess up. So we can do that by selecting the layer, once again, layer 11, and click duplicate at the bottom over here. Or another way to do that is you can swipe on a layer, and this plus button, it will duplicate the layer. So as we can see now in my layer collection, I have 3 of the exact same layers. But what if I don't want all these layers to show up? For example, I had a layer and it made an edit and now it's going wrong. So what I can do is I can use the hide tool. So this function doesn't delete your layer, but it hides it so it doesn't show up on the canvas. So for example, when I was doing this piece was already finished, but to show you guys, I wanted to hide my finished product. So I had already colored in some skin tones for them, as you can see now. So I originally hid that layer, so that would be this layer up here, and we can see it has a similar name to layer 11 because it was duplicated. So what you do on this app is there's these check marks over here on the left of your layers, and you click it and it'll have a hide symbol. So now we have that base skin tone color that I put before my highlights, and if I unhide it, boom, we have all the shading back on that color, or on that layer, sorry, that I had. So we can hide it, we can unhide it, but just because I hide a layer does not mean it's deleted, it just doesn't show up on the canvas until you want it again. So another way to simulate this is lowering the opacity of your layer. What this means is that you make this, for example, you make it lower, or you slide it to the left, slide to your right to adjust like how clear or transparent it is. So I'm going to show you by hiding my base tone layer so we can see that a bit better. Alright, so this is what my piece looks like with the other skin tone layers hidden. And let's say I lower the opacity here. You can see it's kind of like see-through. The purple or whatever blacks, blues that are underneath this layer are showing up. So that's what this opacity tool means. It makes it more transparent or clear. And I usually like to use this when I'm going from my sketch to my line art. I like to lower my sketch opacity just so I can see my line art lines better and they look more crisp while still having those guides for me. So it's kind of like having tracing paper. And by making the opacity 0, it's the same as if we hid a layer. So that's 0 opacity, 100 opacity, and hide layer. They look the same. Next up, what we have is the merge layers tool. What this does is it squishes your layers into one. So let's say I have over here So let's say I forgot to color this part of Mia's hand. Oh, see, and it tells you open layer is hidden. So that means I cannot edit what I see here. So let's say I forgot to color in Mia's hand over here. So right now, let's say I forgot to color Mia's hand, but on this layer, I did color his hand. But because I usually like to put, if they're the same color, I like to put them on the same layer, just so it's easier for me when I'm working on it. So what I can do is I go to the layer, sorry, I dropped my pen. What I can do is I go to layer on top, and I click merge with previous, and now they're on one layer. So before, what it looked like, if I hid the layers, is if I hide that, that only hides their faces and these arms, but his hand is still here. And if I hide this one, his hand is gone. But now when I merge the two, merge with previous, they are now one layer. As we can see, when I hide the layer, everything disappears. And there's also a tool called merge all layers. So I use two different applications for my pieces, and on this application, it merges everything onto one layer, even if it's hidden. So here is my line art sketch that I originally had. As we can see, especially on Bokuto's arm, there's a bunch of sketch marks over here. So what would happen if I merge all these layers? So I'll click merge all layers. Layers that you didn't even see before because I hid them. They're all showing up on the layers. So the sketches, my signature, these color palettes that I was using, and this Kageyama picture that I drew before that went on the sticker of Hinata's phone, they have all merged into this one layer. However, let's say I am using my old application. This is Autodesk Sketchbook, and this is the piece that had 44 layers. So here, for example, my sketch, as we can see on the right here, it's hidden, but you can kind of see this if I unhide it. You can see how that kind of moves because those were my sketches. Here, if I click merge all layers, for example, or merge all, a warning will pop up telling me that anything is hidden will be lost when you merge all layers. So on iArtBook, which is the app I was previously using, when I merged all layers, you could see my sketch even though it was hidden. But here, if I click merge all, anything that was hidden would not be shown. So we can see there's no sketch lines here in the back. So make sure you get used to your interface and comfortable with it to know how it works, because every application is different. Alright, and last but not least, we have the different blending modes. So these are a bit hard to explain as I don't have a complete grasp on what each one does, but how I learned to use them is just by playing around with them to see what it does to the piece and if I like it. So for example, what I did here is I merged all layers previously, so now if I hide this layer, it's only the purple background. And I duplicated this layer and alpha locked it. So duplicate, alpha lock, and we can see now that what I did after is I covered it with a black brush. So now we have this silhouette sort of thing. So one of the blending modes I usually like to use is color dodge. So as you can see, I clicked color dodge, and now that black silhouette is kind of gone, but it is still the same layer. So what I like to do, let's say there is light coming in from the top left over here onto Hinata's head. Cool, so let's pick a orangey color, and I'm gonna go over his head over here. Ooh, do we see that? Phone, are you able to capture this beautiful? Okay, maybe not. Can you guys see it now? Maybe. His hair is now like glowing, and so is his face. You know, I'm just gonna overdo it just to make sure you guys can see it. So in this piece right now, Hinata's face is glowing while everyone else looks kind of normal. Usually I like to use this for lighting, usually not this dark. For example, you could do this and brush it out, blend it together. But one rule of thumb is that you don't want to over saturate this layer. So for example, if I keep doing this bright color, you're gonna eventually be able to see, haha, yes, especially on his jacket. You can see this looks super odd. Hinata looks completely out of place compared to the other two. So what you want to do usually is you want to lower your opacity so it kind of blends in. So you can see lowering the opacity makes it clear, like before. So this color dodge layer is becoming the more clear, transparent layer against the base of what I had in the original painting. Alright, so those are my tips to learning about layers and what I like to do with them and how they can make your life so much easier. Even if you weren't listening to the whole video, because my videos are kind of wonky, and oops, I hit my stand, I'm so sorry. My videos are still kind of bad, but one thing that I want you to take away from this is remember to use alpha lock in your pieces. It is so helpful. You do not have to worry about coloring like within the lines and everything. Please do not go around telling artists that you cannot color in the lines like me, but it makes your life so much easier and you don't have to worry about erasing or staying within the lines, and it just makes it more enjoyable. So yeah, I hope this video was helpful for you guys, and let me know down low in the comments if there's anything else about digital art that you'd like to learn.